Afternoon. I want to welcome you to the December EWPO virtual chat. I'm Sandy Bowman. I manage the Ecology and Waterway Permitting Office. The focus of our chat today will be looking at 404 and 401 permit application common comments. Just as a reminder, please mute your mic and turn your cameras off during the presentation. And please hold your questions till the end or post in the chat, and then we'll address them then. This presentation is pre-recorded. We do have some new staff since our last virtual chat. Aiden has moved is a new employee. He's going to be in charge of the Greenfield district. He's still working with Jenny as he's getting trained up. And then Preeti has come over from the district in Greenfield, and she will be the West Multi-District Specialist. Some disclaimers. Just remember that these comments are general comments, and they're for most 404, 401 applications. Each project is going to be different and have different types of comments that are responded. We do have checklists available on the website. It's something that we use when we're going through permits and reviewing those applications, but they are not conclusive. So you may go through and check yes to everything, and don't be dismayed when we come back with additional comments. So the comments that are following in this presentation are not project specific.
Hi, everyone. My name is Preeti Samra. As Sandy said, I'm the newest ecology and waterway permitting specialist. I came from the district, so I may know some of you. So I am going to be talking about the application order. So pretty straightforward. First, just make sure your application pages are in, the additional activity description, your narrative and tables, copy of the water resource map from the waters report, plan sheets, full waters report, and then coordination, that's including section 7 and section 106, the hydraulic memo, and then at the end just put any other attachments. And then this is definitely not required, but encouraged if you want to go ahead and use PDF bookmarks. That makes it easy for everyone. It's super helpful. So next slide, Jenny. So here, just make sure that you're putting the correct info. Make sure that the mailroom address is changed. And here you can see, like, make sure you do the correct team lead info. And that was shown on the previous slide. And then when you're providing driving directions, use Indianapolis as your port of origin. And then you'd be using the intersection of state roads and interstates as the XY coordinates. So yeah, just make sure that you're double checking all of that and all that info is correct.
Hi, this is Jake Gorski, Seymour Ecology and Waterway Permitting Specialist. Talk a little bit about activity descriptions, and this applies to both forms, the long and the short forms. First thing to do is just not rely on copying and pasting from the NEPA document. There's a lot of information in there that's not necessarily pertinent when it comes to waterway permitting. Keep this in mind that this needs to be a short description. You can think of it more like an elevator pitch. We need to have more information than just see attached, where there'll be more details attached with the activity description. More than anything, just focus on the impacts to water resources. We don't need to know all about the construction of the road and how the different construction practices are going to proceed. What we really need to focus on are the impacts to the waters. So with that being said, we need to include a few things in them, and this is obviously going to be different for different projects. Not every project is the same. First of all, we need to identify the DES number right there in the activity description. General description of the work, so just a quick identification of if it's a structure replacement or a bridge deck overlay, a roundabout installation, whatever it is. This is also where we need to go ahead and get the information out there that there will be a stream relocation if that's involved. Have that right and out in front. If it's a Structure replacement, we want to have both the existing and the proposed dimensions of the structure in 3 dimensions, so length, width, and height of each. If we're laying down riprap at the inlet or outlet, we also need to have those dimensions in all 3 dimensions, so length, width, and depth of the riprap at the inlet and the outlet. We need to have the cumulative permanent impact numbers with linear feet, acres, and cubic yards identified. And if they're temporary impacts, just like with the permanent ones, we need to have those impact numbers and just a quick statement of what the restoration plan might be. Usually that's something like regrading and putting down one of the NDOT seed mixes. I won't patronize you and read the description at the bottom out loud. We'll share this presentation and you guys will be able to go back and read it, but you can see that it's got all the numbers in there, fairly detailed, but not super long. Most of the detailed information will go into the attachment for the activity descriptions. Next slide. The purpose of the project, pretty straightforward, but we also need to include an explanation of why scour protection is needed when we're laying down riprap. When we get to the lake, stream, and wetland impact boxes, we like to see that the NA not applicable in those boxes instead of just leaving them blank. It's a little bit of a clue that those weren't things that were just skipped by accident, that they were actually thought about and weren't applicable to the project. When we get down to the cross-sectional area below the ordinary high, we don't really need to overthink this. So sometimes I see the math done incorrectly where people have divided instead of multiplied, or even tried to use some modeling there. Really all you need to do is multiply the channel width times the channel depth, and that'll give you the cross-sectional area in square feet. So keep that part simple. Overall, more than anything, in both of the forms, we want to make sure that all the impacts are accounted for and stated, and that they match throughout the document. So the first thing we look at are those forms. We need to make sure that those numbers in the plans and the additional activity description are all the same numbers that are in the forms.
Hi everyone, this is Aiden Geisler. I'm the Ecology and Waterway Permitting Specialist with the Greenfield District, and I'm just going to touch on a few of the most common comments that we have for Form 51821. So first, in Block 5, which is the section about avoidance, minimization, and mitigation information, we just want to highlight the importance of being especially thorough in your responses for this section, because this section is closely scrutinized by the agencies. And even if the project does not have mitigation, it's important to make a clear case explaining why it's not required. So to the right here, you can see what we consider a good example of Block 5. And I just want to bring your attention to the bottom box and how they highlight the mitigation ratios and the numbers for acreage and linear feet impacted and required for mitigation. And then another common comment we have is in Block 9, which is the section on permitting requirements. We just want to remind everyone to make sure to add that the 404 and 401 permits are being applied for concurrently.
Okay, hello everybody. I am Aaron Klinger with the Fort Wayne District. I handle the 404, 401 permits, CIF stuff. So I'm going to go over the additional activity description pages. This one has been hit a couple times, but be sure impact numbers match throughout the activity description pages, application plans, etc. Please describe impacts from each individual source / type of fill and give one total impact number. Include riprap dimensions below ordinary high watermark or within a wetland, length, width, and depth, even though it's been said before, but one more time. Removal and replacement and placement of riprap within an existing apron is considered a new riprap and counts as a permanent impact since we are pulling stuff out of the ground. Count length, linear feet of impacts that overlap as a single measure. I.e. compacted aggregate within a culvert or regrading and then placing riprap. Also from the Detroit district, I've gotten some comments from them saying that they would like just to make sure that the aggregate is mentioned when we are placing down new structures, that kind of stuff. If there's any daylighting, any part of the stream that is now exposed to daylight that was not before of a stream, go ahead and mention that. It's kind of nice because we're doing something a little better for the environment and the agencies like to see it. Next slide, please. Okay, provide details of stream relocation, including how much is being relocated in linear feet. How long is that new stream in linear feet? Include a statement on why the relocation is required. Just any basic, we really do like to see ecology related stuff in this, how we're kind of justifying why this is needed. Include a description on any improvements the relocation will have on the stream, elimination of scour holes, improved alignment, how we won't have to go back until 20 years from now or something like that. Describe if the relocation is needed to install the new structure, because it's got a weird skew to it, or it adds flow pattern problems. Add a description where the new channel will be in proximity to the old channel and give width and depth of the new channel. And impacts for a relocation are recalculated from the old stream channel. Next slide, please. Okay, if a stream doesn't cross a right angle, impact should be calculated for the entire linear foot, not just one stream bank. So sometimes I see things kind of not adding up diagonally. So we just kind of want to make sure that it's for the entire length of the project. And if there is any overlap, just make sure that it's mentioned in the narrative and make sure the numbers match. And that's it for me. Everyone have a great day.
Hi everyone, my name is Marissa Engstrom. I am your Vincent's permit specialist. I will be finishing up the additional activity description pages. First, just similar to the permanent impacts, we do want to have the dimensions and quantities of temporary impacts included and described. We also want to make sure that that total number is listed and reported correctly. Be sure to include how long the temporary impacts within the water's resources will be in place, and that it makes sense within the application letting dates. Typically, we see about 60 days in the stream and post-letting date. Any tree clearing, it should be discussed in the activity description and match the IPAC answers that would be provided later on in the application. Any tree clearing that is within a forested wetland is recorded as a permanent impact. Provide mitigation or why no mitigation is being proposed for a project over 300 linear feet, 4.1 acre of total waterway impacts. Mitigation is very site specific. This isn't something we can go into that detailed in this. So if you have any questions, follow up with your permit specialist for any project specific concerns. Your seed mix is properly stated and correct for the area that that the project is being worked in. And if a project is not using an NDOT standard mix, the species and application rate should be given. The little table to the right just gives an example of what a table would look like for a seed mix. And we want to remind you that the attached activity description should be a narrative description of the plan sheets. So any impacts that we do see on the plan sheet should be described in detail in the narrative. For the next slide, just wanted to give you an example, again, of the mitigation wording that you could use and some of the main components that we want to see in there. Really want to make sure that we know where we're purchasing the credits from. Typically, it would be the in-swamp for streams and wetland credits. Mitigation banks are preferred and should be checked before going in lieu fee. They can be found on the Ribbits website that is operated by the Army Corps. There are 11 total areas. You want to be very clear on which one we're purchasing from. We want to repeat the impact type and numbers. They should match the table. And we want to give the mitigation ratios and proposed credits for that too. Oh, and mitigation is dependent on many conditions, like I mentioned before, and we want to encourage you to do pre-coordination if you think that you're going to run into mitigation, and it's very encouraged and will help save time later.
This is Steve Sperry. I'm the multi-district permit specialist for the East team. and I'm going to be discussing stream and wetland impacts and the tables associated with those. I'll start out by saying that the totals given in the tables should match the totals listed on the application pages and the plans. For stream relocations, do not include the riprap in the total sum, since the relocation is inclusive of this impact. Lastly, ensure the appropriate summary tables are included in the application package. We're going to show you a couple of examples of the tables that we've seen used in the past. This first table is the stream impact summary. And what we're seeing here is, well, I have a few comments on this. Regarding the structure, the net change is the difference between the existing structure length and the proposed. Regarding stream relocation, we enter the existing length of the waterway as measured along the existing stream alignment within the proposed construction limits. Enter the proposed length of the waterway as measured along the new stream alignment and also within the proposed construction limits. The total linear feet of stream impact is the sum of the net change in the structure length and the net change in the stream length. This table also calls for information on mitigation. The mitigation ratio and amount must be in conformance with the regulatory agency requirements. This information is detailed or was detailed in Marissa's presentation. Here we have an example of a wetland summary table. As far as the first information that you see on here, the various columns, the wetland ID, type, jurisdictional status, and acreage must be the same as that shown in the approved waters report. Now, the information on impacts is typically obtained from the design files generated by the project engineer. And again, I'm not going to go into the mitigation ratio and mitigation amount much at all, since that was it's very similar to the approach for streams. We want to see an aerial water resource map included in the application. You can copy this from the water resources or from the waters report. It's typically the water resources map, and it just provides an overall view of the project, and it assists the agencies with getting a initial view of what is going on. We provided an example here of a waters resources map from an approved waters report.
Hello, I'm Patrick. I'm the permits coordinator for the LaPorte district. I want to talk to you about plan sheets. We want to see highlighted areas and call out boxes on the plan sheets that show both temporary and permanent impacts below the ordinary high water marks during streams and impacts to wetlands. And we want to make sure that the plan sheets use the correct delineated feature names. Sometimes these projects get programmed early on with a local name of the stream. So we do want to use the USGS topographical maps, the names on those. And up in LaPorte district and in northern Indiana, it's very flat. Sometimes we need to distinguish the flow direction of streams. So we always want to see an arrow marking which way the stream is flowing. And make sure we label all the wetlands and the approved water report on the plan sheets, regardless whether we're going to impact them or not. And if we are not going to impact them, just label them as do not disturb. And we want to see cross sections for all those wetland impacts with the label and showing the boundaries of those wetlands on the plan sheets. And we're going to want to see cross-sectional drawings of the stream impacts with the label for the ordinary high water mark and the flow line elevation. And on one of the plan sheets, we do want to see the existing structure dimensions and the proposed structure dimensions just somewhere in the plan sheets. Doesn't have to be on each one. With that being said, we do want to see just the relevant plan sheets. We don't necessarily need to see maintenance of traffic. And next slide. And so this is just a good example. You can see the temporary impacts are marked in a green little box there, and the permanent impacts are labeled in red there with the proper wetland names and the stream name. And you can see Sugar Creek is flowing, it looks like northeast. So, and then you can see at the bottom there, the cross-sectional view with the wetland called out and all of the dimensions of the wetland. We want to see depth and all of that, and the cubic yards as well. That's all I got.
Hi, everybody. This is Justice McGill. I'm the Ecology and Permitting Specialist for the Carpentersville District, and I'm going to continue the conversation on plan sheets and some new information regarding pump around information. So first, plan sheets must show the details of pump around, the pump around hose, secondary contaminants, etc. EWPO is actually moving away from the standard drawing, as this information is not really project specific information. So we actually like to see those details now on the plan sheets. As it's been stated before, the dimensions of cofferdam and riprap below the ordinary mark are listed and listed correctly on the plan sheets. Locations of cofferdam should not be placed within the confines of riprap placement. And I'll show a little bit more examples of this in the next slide. The pump around hose may only be placed over roadways if roadway closed or has means to protect the hose. And pipeline projects must have alternative forms of diverting water to the outlet. Pumping to a roadside ditch is not acceptable. And on the next slide, I'm going to kind of go into details about this. So in recent guidance to the Army Corps and IDEM, we've found out that a lot of construction has been discharging pump around water to nearby roadside ditches. We were not informed of this until recently, and under IDEM and Army Corps conditions, this is actually not acceptable. And specifically, it's condition 8 of the permit. So in coordination with the conditions, we have to find alternative means and methods to get water that's pumped from the inlet back to the original project stream. So that could mean a number of different ways, but we are looking on the plan sheets to show those details so we can avoid these kind of problems in the future. In this example here, you can clearly see that the pump intake is actually discharging to a roadside ditch. The outlet is fine because it's being pumped to the original project stream in question, and it's fine there. The roadside ditch is actually not correct, but as you can see, we're moving away from the what we call the standard, even though this is not an NDOT standard project labeling, and actually labeling it on the plan sheets. But just some other things to note is that the cofferdam is shown, the actual labels and dimensions of that are labeled, but the cofferdam is actually placed inside the riprap. And we cannot prove it because it's actually not proper erosion control means and methods, and it should be moved to the furthest limits of where the actual riprap placement is going to be. So now I'm going to go into details of the alternation of some additional pump around means and methods that we can do. And And what that means is as long as the original water from the inlet is being pumped to the outlet of the project stream, you can come up with almost any method that we can find suitable. The easiest method that we can do is actually milling the road. In this specific example, we went down 4 feet, laid the hose inside the roadway, and then the road was then filled back in and the water is pumped back to the project stream. It still meets the conditions of the nationwide in this particular example, and we have no delays in that sort. However, we could have done temporary bored pipes or some other means that could be more project specific. But as long as the inlet water is being returned to the project stream, we have no issues. The issue is when we physically cannot move the hose into a location that's accessible by construction. Usually we can put it inside the structure that's being replaced, but that's not always possible, mostly with CIPP liners. And that means we have to find another way, and the easiest and the most example that we've had come recently is double pump around methods. And on the next slide, I'm going to show you exactly what that means. So a double pump around is exactly what it sounds like, is have one pump directly pumping to a nearby culvert, and then another pump directly from the nearby culvert back to the original stream project culvert. In this circumstance, it's only because it's a CIPP liner and we cannot actually run the hose inside the structure itself or find another means to do so. In this particular project example, we could not do a bored pipe and we could not find the hose because it was an interstate and the road closure was not possible. So we had to use the double pump around methods. This specific, if projects are going to go this way, it does have to be approved by the Army Corps and IDEM because they want to make sure that the water is actually being returned back to the original project stream. In doing so, it still meets nationwide conditions if that was like what we're trying to achieve, but it might require just additional mapping or additional coordination on our part. And usually that just means that we provide a plan like that was shown here that shows the energy dissipators and how the pump is going to be pumped to a nearby culvert and the approximations of the hose to be reached. The most important thing on here is probably elevation marks. We want to make sure that the water that's being pumped to the nearby culvert is actually reaching that culvert and it's actually being returned back to the original. I know this is a new and very specific to a lot of people, but it is it's still being a work in progress and it's still being discussed by NDOT and the Army Corps and IDEM. So if you do have project questions, always reach out to your specialists. It is always very project specific, so we may not have run into this situation every single time, but we'll do our best to kind of coordinate early on to avoid some major project delays.
Okay, I'm Jenny Curry, and I am the team lead for the east half of the state. So I'm going to talk about the coordination sections and hydraulic memo and some other just comments that don't really fit into any of these categories. So starting with section 7, coordination, if there are any endangered and threatened or rare species other than the Indiana bat or northern long-eared bat, there should be further coordination with the IDNR or Fish and Wildlife included. We see this most of the times with the gray bat down in the southern districts. So we should have further coordination with those agencies if any other species are showing up on your species list. If your project falls within the U.S. Fish and Wildlife interim policy, which has specific work types that fall into the policy that are approved by the policy, and also have to be not within 20 feet, I think it's 20 feet of certain waterways. So for example, we recently had a project that was close to the Ohio River that the interim policy work type was correct, but it fell within 20 feet of the Ohio River. So we couldn't use that as coordination for or clearance for those species. So be sure to just state that if it falls into the interim policy in your description narrative. Include the Fish and Wildlife official species list and the IPAC questionnaire and the attachments. Now we want the whole attachment, not just the first pages of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife letters with the letterhead on it. We need the entire documents for both of those. Please keep an eye on the species list. We do have several species that are popping up lately, including mussels, bumblebees. We have in the past had running buffalo clover, but it appears to have been removed from the federal list of endangered and threatened species in September, early September. But that may show up in some older coordination. So keep an eye out for that. Also, the Kirkland State, Massasauga, and several bird species are showing up on those species lists. Another species showing up is the monarch butterfly, which is just showing up as a candidate, so no further coordination is needed for that. For the DNR coordination, be sure that we're including the correct early coordination response letter, which is usually from Christy Stanifer. It looks like what is shown here. Some consultants are boxing in the Natural Heritage Database section, which is really kind of what we're looking for on this response letter. So that's just kind of nice when that's done. It's not a requirement, but just something that is nice to see. For Section 106 coordination, be sure all coordination is included for, like I said, for Section 7 and Section 106. Include the MPPA Category A page with applicable categories highlighted or boxed in, like what is shown here. Please do not pull the Section 106 section from the NEPA document and include that as your Section 106 coordination. We do have this MPPA Category A page that is readily available, so please use this in lieu of the NEPA pages. If your project falls under the MPPA Category B, please include the entire form as seen here. So that includes the introductory pages and the findings. So here we see that we have an A9 and B9. So be sure that if it's, again, not a requirement in the narrative to spell out what was found in Section 106. Some consultants do that, and that is great. But be sure that you're spelling out all categories that the project falls under. For the hydraulic memo, if one is not done, please be sure that is noted in the narrative section. But if one is done, please be sure to include the most updated approved hydraulic memo. Here is an example of a consultant that boxed in the proposal that was chosen. Again, just a helpful thing, not a requirement, but just to see that. So other comments, please do not include the form instructions. That goes for any forms. Of course, we want those to be read and followed, but those do not need to be included in the application package. In fact, the agencies don't really want to see those. Just a note for the Detroit district, if you have a project that's a pipeliner and it's kind of a longer pipe, which would mean over 150 feet, that has placement of new riprap below the ordinary high water mark or within a wetland, well, I guess it would just be below the ordinary high water mark, it would more than likely be a 401 IP application because the length exceeds what is allowed within the RGP conditions. These generally won't require mitigation, but it does require the IDEM 30-day public notice period. So that's just some guidance that we've had from the Detroit district that have affected some projects up in that area. IDEM is still requiring the 30-day pre-filing notice for individual permits. We had a period of a few weeks where we thought maybe they weren't. So you may have heard that guidance, but we have since found out that that is not true. So they are still requiring that 30-day pre-filing notice. So just make sure that you're thinking about that when preparing your individual permit applications. For RGP permits, they still cannot be modified. So if there are any project changes after the permit has already been issued, then we would have to submit a new application to have those changes permitted as well. So here, this is just pulled from our permitting manual. It's typical permit timelines. Just as a refresher, we still get these questions like, how long is this going to take? So we just wanted to show you this. Please note, though, we will do a separate virtual chat on CIF permits, but just take a note here that this does say 6 months average agency time for DNR permits and 9 months. It should be to us ahead of RFC. You want to make that more 9 months to a year because they are taking longer than when this was published. And we will open it up for questions at this point. Corps on board with that, just to make that known. We don't have an official response from them and won't have an official response from them on those until they get the permit and sign off on the pre-JD that they will take those resources. So does that make sense? Answer your question?
Yes, that does. Thank you.
Yes, we will have a copy available. It may take a couple weeks to get uploaded, but we will have it on our EWPO webpage like we did our last one. There will be a link to our virtual chat there. The person who was doing those for NDOT has left, so there's somebody filling in right now. So it's taking a few weeks to get those uploaded, but eventually we'll have that uploaded, and I can make note in the chat of that when that happens like we did last time. I did want to mention that we have had several questions on our nationwide permit expiration dates. As most of you know, that those are set to expire in March 18th of 2022. Just like in the past, for those of you who have been around for a while, we basically will make note of any of those projects here in-house. And then when that time comes and the agencies ask us for our re-verification list, we will send all of those DES numbers off to them, and they will re-verify them as one lump sum. Usually it's a year extension on all of those. So if there are any that are beyond that and need special circumstances, we can deal with you one-on-one on those permits. But so if you have any that you have questions on, feel free to email your permitting specialist. But we're all keeping lists of those that are going to be expiring and probably not into construction before expiration date.
Joe, this is Sandy. We had a meeting with the DNR because they participate in our monthly meetings, or actually bi-monthly meetings. But those were the only two surface areas that I mentioned that are running out.
Sandy, you're muted if you're trying to address the group.
Not according to this.
I can hear you, Sandy.
I can hear you, Sandy.
I can hear myself too. Hi, looks like I should be not muted. But service areas, the only two they mentioned are those two. It may be something I could get from them is just kind of a summary of what was allocated and what's available now I can ask and then post that here in the chat for everyone. I will make a note to do that when we get off. Oh, tree mitigation questions. There are credits. That is a separate program, and I don't think there are any limits at all to that, like we have for InSwim. So, as long as the biologist assigned to that area for the DNR approves it, after our screening, we should be good to go with that. It doesn't have the legal framework that's sitting underneath, so it's pretty well open.
Did that answer your question, Jen? Did you guys hear Justice explanation of the double pump around?
No.
No.
No. Okay. Justice, will you take that again, please?
I still can't hear him.
Just a moment. Sorry, we have a lot of computers in one room, so hang on.
Sorry about that, everybody. Regarding has the double pump around question been used in project? I've had 2 projects that I know that have used it successfully, but the projects were very different and unique circumstances. One stream was ephemeral and the other one was a perennial, so I'm not entirely sure if the ephemeral was actually used. I have pictures that it was placed, but it could not have actually had source water to do that. But for the ephemeral, it was actually 500 plus feet of hose being used, and it was pumped. I think the contractor had to elevate the pump around to a larger pump, but it was successfully used. We have been approved of it.
Okay, did you guys hear the answer for him when he was talking about the grassy swale question? I want to make sure that that was heard as well. Somebody can just say yes or no.
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 No. Okay. Justice, take that one too, please. Sorry.
Apparently I'm having the technical issues. No, you cannot pump to a grassy swell nor a roadside ditch. The issue is it has to meet the conditions of the RGP program. And if being diverted to a nearby feature that's not the original project stream, it does not meet those conditions. Therefore, if it's pumped to a grassy swell, it does not meet that. So you have to find alternative means and methods to get that water back to the original project stream.
Okay, we got it that time. Thanks, guys. Sorry about that. Technical difficulties. Okay, we have a few minutes for remaining questions. Do we have any more here? Okay, so I will ask you guys a question then. What? Oh, can you read it? Ross, you had your hand up?
Yeah, it's a lot to type. I've had some coordination with the Army Corps, and it's my understanding with the Arizona Court of Appeals vacating the waters rule that potentially 401 individual permits are not being fully approved. They're being reviewed, but maybe not getting full Army Corps approval. Have you guys had that issue at all?
That is a great question. We actually have not complicated, but a split answer for you. Louisville has proceeded with their reviews and approvals of their permits with the 401 IPs. Detroit and Chicago have not. So they are still on hold at this point.
Cool, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Has there been any feedback on additional jurisdictional adjustments that they expect rolling out of that case and additional rulemaking?
Jason, have you seen, because they did a proposal, I know Carrie from Federal Highways sent that to us. Is their new proposed rule?
Yeah. Have you? Yes, I have looked at it. The question, I guess, is maybe have you had any discussions of they anything from the Corps in regard to what they see? More, I mean, it's been, I guess, settled back into earlier calls, but have you heard anything from the Corps that maybe more change?
I think it's been pretty quiet other than that coming out. So.
Yeah. Okay.
Jason, it's been my understanding that it's going to go back to the Rapanos rule, the 86 rule stuff, where ephemerals are back in.
Landon Little, you want to elaborate a little bit on your question?
Yeah, so with interstate CIPP liner projects where we're not able to pump around through the culvert and there isn't a near culvert to do a double pump around, are we able to pump that water to a high point to an energy dissipator and let it drain back into the upstream? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. But the answer is no, unfortunately, and you have to find another means to do that. And usually the best answer is the temporary bored pipe or the milling of the roadway. If there's not a nearby culvert, which is sometimes likely with these long interstate intersections, you just have to find another means to do so. Someone actually proposed one time to use a water truck to pump water from the inlet, drive the truck to the outlet side and dump it that way. And it's never been actually proposed for the project, but it seemed like it would be approved. So you do have to find an alternative.
Okay, it looks like we're right at time. So I don't see any additional questions, but if you have any additional questions, you're welcome to email your permitting specialist and we'll do our best to answer those for you. I even had a good question for you guys, but we ran out of time to ask that. So next time, because we will be our next one next year, some point, we'll be doing one of these on CIF permits as well. So I'll save that question for then. So I thank you all for taking your time today and participating in our chat. And thank you for the great questions. And I hope you all have a wonderful holiday.